Bang.
Got it.
In action, live, in the flesh. It's funny because it's on Zoom, so it's not really in the flesh. Cool.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
This is
You're
the Age
listening
of
to the Great
Synthesis
Simplification.
podcast.
That's such a good name. Oh, it's very dramatic. I like it.
Yeah, see, one problem with me is like I'll have an idea and then it like has steam and then it fucking loses steam and I need to do something for when it loses steam to stay disciplined to like carry out that vision.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like there's a window of opportunity where you have to make the idea into a thing. And if you haven't made the idea into a thing by that point, well, then it's hard to kind of get yourself back into that frame of mind sometimes.
Yeah. You know, one thing I tried to do was I tried to start this thing called Community of Mystics, which I just in theory wanted to start like a community gatherings in my neighborhood. And I made like I made a website and I put a description and I fucking got QR codes and I made them into stickers and I put them around, but it's a complete flop. Like nobody, you know, I didn't get a single email response.
Really? That sucks.
Yeah, but I've met people in person who said that they were down. But anyways, I guess that's just an example of an idea I've had that felt really right and resonant, but then just never unfolded. I was like, I kind of gave up. But it's not too late. It's not too late.
I feel like that speaks to what we were talking about the other day with like it's one thing to have like good ideas and like have a lot of energy that's like trying energy, like putting out effort into the world of like, hey, let's do the thing that we care about. I don't know, any version of that. But then like, how do you avoid losing all your energy in doing that? Like, how do you avoid just running up against a brick wall of not getting anywhere? And I feel like that's where I was coming from when listening to the chat between Nate Higgins and Nora Bateson, where I was like, I feel like a lot of her energy had been, I have all this energy, but I have nowhere to go with it, you know? And we were talking the other day about how like patience as a virtue and like being able to sense into certain moments, on a small scale, just in a conversation, when you can help draw that conversation in a fruitful direction, let's say. But also you can think about that in life where like you're going to have a bunch of ideas in theory, and like knowing which ones of them to try at which times, that's a useful skill to learn. And I guess the question is like, how do you learn that skill? I don't know. Any thoughts that come up?
I agree that like inevitably you're gonna have like days of less dopamine or less motivation to pursue that goal. And I agree that it's a great skill to be able to stay disciplined. And I guess part of it is like a meta awareness of what's happening. So you could be like, okay, I know that there's fluctuations and oscillations, and just like being ready to push through that. I get like, dude, that's what metacognition unlocks, is like you gain more agency and free will over different natural cycles that you go through. So I guess just like the preparation of like, yeah, I believe in this idea and I won't feel super inspired to pursue it, but on those days I know I just have to push harder. And I'm sure it ends up being worth it. But it's a lot easier said than done, and I'll fucking self-admit right now to like I'm not good at it. I've gotten better at it with meditation specifically. Like I'll meditate every single day. I will just meditate every day, and I will I will not necessarily always enjoy, but when I'm having a shitty meditation, I'll sit there and I'll be like, what's on the other side of this feeling? I'll be like, what? I just know that those challenging ones are sometimes the most transformative, where you can break through. And it's just like sitting in the fire. You have to be able to take the reins back from your impulses coming from like your body and the lower angels of your nature that just want to go like on your phone and get like the cheap instant gratification. So that resistance and pushback is like, oh, you gotta sit through that and like tell your body to sit like an animal, and you take the reins back. And I think there's some sort of analogy that in the Bhagavad Gita about that, between like the battle between the soul and the ego. Um, but anyways, the viewers can like look into that themselves if they want to read the Bhagavad.
Yeah, good
But
luck. Good luck to him.
yeah, so unless you have something more to say about that, I wanted to introduce a topic.
Mm. Um, no, let's introduce a topic. I mean, there are more things that I could say, but let's go for it.
Okay. Well, I guess like me personally, one of the things I've um felt most passionate about, and um just like giddy, and like one thing I think that the world needs the most is like just like the idea of community and like a stronger sense of belonging and connection with other humans,
Mm.
for like multiple different reasons. But I guess like part of my background and just like feeling the despair of loneliness, and just like the pain of that has really driven me to be like, what is it about community? Like at first I didn't know what I was missing really. Um, but then it started to make more and more sense, like studying and how like technology has gotten to us of like the place of being isolated consumers, potted plants. But anyways, this idea of like people needed each other, and like nature selected for tribes people who could cooperate and play well together. Um, and we figured out a way to basically cut ourselves off from not
Mm.
only like connection to each other, but connection to nature, and
Hmm.
as like as collateral, which like the Nora Batesman thing, she talks all about like it's everything's about relationships. Like you can't really isolate any one thing and fully describe what it is without talking about its relationship to how it functions with other parts of a same system, you know? Like the thing just doesn't make sense. It's a narrow view. It's not the
Hmm.
whole story of that individual piece. So my question is, it has to do with the quote I sent you,
Mm.
um, which was like basic needs should should have community around them. Um, and I'm thinking like one of my missions is to make like loneliness impossible, to make it like mandatory that everyone has like deep connections. So it's like, um, I guess like my topic is like, what about if we study like anthropology in that lens, what
Hmm.
about what about the past of our species made it so that people had to and needed to be in relationship, and I
Mm.
guess kind of like how we've come out of that, and then what we could do now, like how we could like re-architect,
Mm.
I guess like a civilization that
Hmm.
like how in modern day with the godlike technology, how do we make it mandatory that people need to need each other? It's
Yeah.
not possible to just like reside comfortably in your home with like the baseload energy.
Hmm. 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 Wow. What a question. What a contribution. That's you're popping off. My head's popping off. It's like there's so much there to unpack. So I wanted to highlight your question, the question. There was a lot of parts to it, but it was like that part where you were like, what was it about how we related in archaic times that made community necessary, right? It was like there's something about how we were living, where living with other people and being in deep relationship with them was absolutely essential and not very much not optional to. I mean, we could just think about it in survival terms. Um, and then you're talking about how do we lose that? How do we manage to grow towards over millennia the kind of society where people can feel isolated and lonely and, for example, turn into school shooters and be a net negative by almost any metric. Shooting children at school is a pretty net negative thing to do. Uh, uh,
Very
A
much
little bit
so.
bad for laughing, but yeah. Anyway, it's not what we want from our young people. That's
Okay.
not an ideal way of contributing.
We're already gonna get canceled, dude, for laughing at that.
uh,
Fuck.
yeah, yeah. And so then the question is like, okay, how do we get there? What do if that thing is so necessary, how do we come to like do away with it? And um, why, if we've been able to survive this long without that thing that we've done away with, something like deep, authentic relationship of some description that we'll try and outline, what about it is so important to recover, to reclaim? How can that help us? And why is that important? And then the question of how do we actually do that? And
Mm,
so there's a lot of questions in there, and a lot of stuff to
definitely.
talk about. And I feel like that could be a whole podcast in and of itself, and maybe it will be. And just on the quote that you sent me, the quote was, "Every single one of our basic needs should have a community around it." Um, yeah. And so that what that brings up for me, that quote, is that like at the moment, um, I guess there's this, rather not my idea at all, that people are living very individualistic lives. And here we're talking about uh, some of the ways that individualism can show up in a negative way or a non-ideal way. So it's like, just as an example, um, I live in a share house with my friends, but in a sense, I'm responsible for making my own money so that I can get my own food, so that I can make my own food, so that I can,
Mm,
you know, have my own job, so that I can further my own career, so that I can learn ideas on my own, so that I can do the things that interest me. And I might learn about one of my housemates' days if I'm lucky, if we happen to connect at the right time. But otherwise, I'm kind of just living my own life. And it's not that any of those are like bad things, but it's just that like um there's nothing built into any of that, which means that I need to connect with other people. Where
yeah.
connecting with other people is a fundamental structural part of uh, what allows me to live. Like I can go through my life, completely on my own if I want to. Um, and I guess we're making the case that there's something about that which doesn't seem sustainable, actually. Like there's actually a way of relating to other people, or here a way of not relating to other people, that is itself unsustainable. Which in itself is kind of an interesting thing, because we're talking about like not necessarily like a way of relating to the biosphere, or a way of relating to like other species, or how we use energy and resources and that sort of thing. That's a whole conversation in and of itself about sustainability, but we're talking about a way of relating to other people that might be unsustainable. So that's like a very um I don't know, big if true. um Does that track for you, just as like a framing
Yeah.
bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I heard was that just giving like an example of your personal life of how people can still be close, but there's having that
Physically
like,
close. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
the physically close, but the lack of like actual like natural interdependency that we evolved with
Mm-hmm.
isn't necessary. So you can get away with being physically close to other people, but not actually feeling satiated socially, like
Mm-hmm.
how our ancestors were.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
in those different settings where it felt, I don't know, like just like you both had to like go, like I don't know, maybe you could get water by yourself, but I'm just thinking of like people who would go, like they both benefited from the teamwork of like, hey, like we both need water and we can only get it from like us three going. So you bond through that, right? Because it implicitly shows you care about each other's survival.
Mm-hmm.
And and you feel closer, you feel like tight knit and that you can trust them in psychological safety. So
Mm-hmm.
already you have this beautiful foundation. And you could take that really far. Like when they'd come back and they do like, you know, different cultural stuff like dancing or singing, like that really feels like it was uh kind of grown from such a strong foundation of togetherness,
Mm-hmm.
and it like reinforces that relationship
Hmm.
of them being
Hmm.
super close versus like the now like the foundational part's kind of severed relatively,
Hmm.
and people try to socialize as like an add-on,
Mm.
like
Hmm.
only going for like the kind of more unnecessary recreational stuff, um without the underpinning type of strong foundation of needing each other.
Hmm. Hmm. And so we can even see that in the way that we uh, do different activities, like you were saying, like any kind of extracurriculars that someone is doing, uh, you might get social activity as like a bonus to that. Like say, I don't know, you learn a martial art, for example. It's like, okay, you have to go outside, you have to find a martial art place, you have to go there, and you have to be like, you have to say to someone, hey, will you teach me your martial art? And then you're in a class with them, and then with other people, and then you be with them, and it's like, well, in a sense, that situation does not explicitly recognize that there's something about being with other people there
Mm,
that's really valuable, and we're kind of
yeah,
like we're getting social energy out of that, getting social experience out of that, without necessarily acknowledging that that's something that's really important that we're getting out of it. And so it's like
yeah,
it's kind of hiding underneath, you know what I mean? It's kind of like we do all these different activities where socialization, being with in deep relationship with other people, is just kind of there as a byproduct, but it's not front and center of the intention of why people are there. You know what I mean? That means it's relegated to the unconscious in some way, you could say.
yeah. And I think you're totally right, and I think that kind of feeds the shame around loneliness, because you're not acknowledging like the importance of like connection,
Mm,
and it's kind of, yeah, it kind of does like hide underneath like that activity of like, oh, I'm just here because I want to like be good at karate or something,
mm,
and we
mm,
happen to be in the same class. And I'm
mm,
sure people do make it explicit in certain environments, but at the same time, it's yeah, it's something for it actually. Um,
mm,
it definitely, I feel it's something that needs to be talked about more, because it is a problem how people feel so much shame around loneliness,
mm.
and around I don't know, I guess I've felt it personally, and I'm sure if I felt it, other people feel it.
Yeah,
Um,
I definitely have.
uh,
Yeah.
of establishing that like uh hey, like we're hanging out because we need to have relationships as humans, and
Mm.
you're one of the humans I want to have a relationship with.
So
And
there's a cool
yeah,
meta angle, if I can. There's a cool meta
yeah,
angle
go
here
for it.
where we can be like, well, I get a lot out of our relationship, and the chats that we have are really cool, and feel like we're really able to uh, connect in such a way that I can't connect with many other people in my life. And it's fun, like so that's like and I can like bring that front and center and be like, okay, I want to have deep relationships with people, and I feel like my friendship with Benny is important to me, and I'm willing to put in the time and energy into these conversations, so that we can keep this thing going. And that's really cool and really it's precious to me, like I said the other day. And it's like this kind of thing where if we're talking about the importance of, let's say, relationships like this one, in a way, just to use ourselves as an example, because why
Hmm.
not? uh, in a way, we're saying, well, look at what we're doing here. We've had to like use this amazingly uh, powerful but also new technology to be able to connect uh, literally from opposite sides of the planet. And it's kind of like in an ideal world, potentially you would want people to be able to have the kinds of conversations and relationships that we have with the people that they're around every day, and not need to use
Yes.
a technology which arguably is either fragile or unsustainable or both. Um, so, I mean, we could just make a very brief argument that like the technology like this is fundamentally very energy intensive, and in the future, we may be living in a civilization where people don't have access to that kind of energy use, or they may not be able to
Hmm.
connect with people on the other side of the
Yeah.
planet as easily. Um, mm. And we could talk about the limitations of Zoom as well. It's like there's something about the way that we're showing up with each other that we want to be able to export to people's everyday relationships, not just relationships on Zoom.
Yeah. It makes me like, how do you even infiltrate that? I mean, it's definitely a cultural shift, but it's like, I guess one idea that comes to me is like education about the importance of community. Like that's
Mm,
nothing we, like we grew up with it being implicit,
Hmm.
I think, at least implicit enough to where it's a thing because we experience it, and that in
Mm.
itself is proof that it's a thing.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you had recess, and that's obviously like go play, but like, yeah, it just doesn't seem like there was enough emphasis on like,
It's so
hey guys,
funny.
like, yeah,
No,
it's like,
I totally track that. It's like it's so funny that in primary school there would be like this 20-minute window or something which is like this is the play period, okay? This is when you can just and the rest of the time is like no, sit down at your desk and don't move and like learn, I don't know, sums or words or whatever. It's like that's not what kids
yeah,
are like. That's kids aren't even like that. Uh, they just I don't know, man. I just when you kind of phrase it in that way and point out that there's like a 20-minute period for recess, it just makes present for me just how absurd modern
yeah.
education actually is.
It's
Uh,
like taking a break
it's
from like
actually
the quote unquote
absurd.
important stuff that you're there for. But it's like, oh, actually, the most valuable stuff is like recess. You're socially
Literally,
developing by learning how to play with people. Like that's the action. That's more school than sitting in the fucking classroom is. And I guess aside from like learning basic things like alphabet and like math and stuff, like the foundational stuff, yeah, there's a lot more of how like the impact you as an individual has in the world. It's much more shaped by what you learned on the playground at recess
mm.
than what type of like just information knowledge you learned like in a classroom.
Mhm, mhm.
I think, I mean, obviously like speaking,
Absolutely. I mean, not only does that very much coincide with my own personal experience, but I think there's stacks of scientific evidence which backs up the things that you're saying. Like, I mean, not only from like a literally like so many kids are hyperactive these days, and like there are all kinds of theories as to why that might be, and obviously there are lots of reasons. But one of the reasons is that we keep them locked inside and want to have them sit at desks all day. It's like, what are kids? They have a whole lot of energy. You need to let them outside so that they can get rid of it. Playing is
yeah,
fundamentally important to learning. Uh, throughout the animal kingdom, throughout mammals, really. I think mostly mammals. I'm not so sure that reptiles play, but yeah, it's important. That is to say, it's really deep drive
yeah,
to play and to just not be sitting still all the time. It's a really silly way to try to teach people. And I guess in terms of scientific evidence, I was going on about how um, I mean it's pretty well documented that like social imitation, learning by watching other people, is
yeah,
fundamental to our success as a species. Um, so we can talk about mirror neurons in that context. So neurons that light up when you watch another person do something. Um, and so like that's kind of like, if you watch your uh dad like raking leaves or something, like that's an experience that I've had. It's like in a sense he's not like teaching you something explicit. He's not being like, oh, this is how you rake the leaves, right? He's not like saying with his words, but he's doing the thing. And if you're a young child and you're like watching, then that is like deeply imprinted on you in like a how to like procedural knowledge kind of way. And that's all happening, all that learning is happening at like a subverbal procedural level, and it's all like really, really important to how people learn. And I guess we could say, um, just to tie that into the bit about school, is that like um, after the age of 4, uh, kids learn primarily from being around other people and being around their peers and like learning from their peers about like what things are socially appropriate and like how to make games together. And they really kind of like bootstrap each other up to like higher levels of development. Um, and so I guess all of that to say, being around other people and learning from them is like so fundamentally totally important to the way that people grow and learn. I mean, both as kids and as adults as well. And the other thing I just wanted to add was that at schools are so funny because we have this weird thing where we're like, oh, we're going to send our children here and we're going to teach them something. So they're there to learn, and we're there to, the teachers are there to teach them. And we have this explicit like, oh, they don't have this knowledge in their brains yet, and we have this knowledge and we're the teachers and we're going to put it into their brains. And it's very like explicit and kind of deliberate. Um, but also it's like that's kind of not how learning works in a way. And it's like what who are we to think that we actually understand how learning works, if you know what I mean? And so it's like in the sense that teachers can just be good role models of how to be an adult, and they do that regardless of what they're explicitly teaching. They do that just by being around children, right? So like the idea that if that thing about social imitation that I'm talking about is really true, that just by being around an adult as a young person, you can learn a lot about how to be as an adult, then who we choose as teachers are really important, not because of what they explicitly teach to our kids, but just because of who they are, you know?
Hmm.
And I guess that's another place where this, we were talking earlier about how socialization or the importance of being social is kind of like hiding underneath our impulse to do extracurricular activities. In a similar kind of way, uh, the actual learning that goes on at school is kind of hidden underneath our understanding of what learning we think goes on at school. Because there's a whole curriculum, right? They're like, oh, here are the
Yeah.
explicit things you need to learn each year, right? That's actually happening totally on top of all of the most important kinds of learning that children are doing as to like how to become an adult. Um, and I actually find that really funny.
Yeah, it's really silly, especially because like I think that we need to be able to learn implicitly, but also like make it explicit, but so only for the purpose of like understanding how to do the thing better. And I guess just like I don't know, I guess an easy example for me to tie it into on the concepts we talked about before is like, um, hey, like you're interconnected and you share DNA with everything on the planet and the science of ecology. But it's like, hey, have this experience of like spending um, quality time in nature or like coming in contact with some sort of experience of oneness and meditation. Like that, the information, the explicit information to me feeds and grows the seed, and the seed comes
Mm,
from uh, the the experiential knowledge.
mm.
So
Right. So I guess
yeah,
one way of responding to that is that like I was kind of making this distinction between explicit learning that we want people to do and implicit learning that happens regardless of what explicit learning we're teaching them. And you're making the point that it's like, well, those things themselves are fundamentally interrelated. And like obviously the explicit learning that you get someone to do will change the kinds of deep learning that goes on for them and
yeah,
vice versa. So those are interrelated as well. And the things that we explicitly teach people definitely matter, definitely matters a lot. Um, it's just that that's not the only learning that's going on.
yeah. Um, a quick meta side note, I'm definitely noticing myself being kind of stumped, I guess
Mm.
because of like the pressure of recording, I guess. Like now within my mind of like people might be watching.
But
So that's something that I'm slightly working through as well.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, I
but
think no, no, you go.
well, I remembered what I was gonna say before.
Hmm.
Like I got stumped because I was like, oh, I was gonna say something and I forgot, but I just remembered.
I think it was because I was raving for a little while. So I get off this onto when I start raving, then I'm detached from actually attending to you. So I can imagine that like partly why you might be stumped is that there's not necessarily as much of a flow between you and I when it was kind of like there was a question there and I felt like I was answering the question maybe in a way. And well that's
But it's
useful. But
good.
like let's get back to what you remembered.
Um, well, the type of I guess like part of the pitfall of not making it things explicit, like how to socialize and like why that's important and doing like a whole curriculum on that is it ends up going unspoken and implicit and it ends up going into like toxic territory with like the whole like high school hierarchy and you know
Mm.
people I mean there's a whole host of fucking reasons for why like someone would be a bully but
Mm.
in general like you know people judging each other and there being like cliques that are kind of in like um rivalry and stuff
Hmm.
it just feels like it's not a nurturing space to learn how to play well with other humans. Like
Mm.
there's a lot of just like overthinking and lack of psychological safety. So I think that could I mean definitely be I don't know if completely erased, but it could definitely be made better and improved from just like an explicit teaching or a
Mm.
class about how mammals like socialize
Hmm.
or how you know how humans behave and play more of an infinite game
Hmm.
with socializing.
Yeah, a lot of cool threads there. I feel like a couple of the more important ones for me are I'm holding what you're saying, but also at the same time wanting to be mindful of the importance of competition in development. And and
Yeah,
we're not saying we want to create safe spaces where there's no competition because competition is fundamentally toxic to human relationship. We're wanting to create spaces where uh, I don't know, something like competition can be done optimally and like cooperation as well. And like there would have to be a dialectic between those things. Um,
yeah.
and
I
I
think
think that the reason
competition
for that is
is pretty
probably
good
because
there.
people are both inherently competitive and inherently cooperative. And if you try to emphasize one, you'll just end up repressing the other, and it will come out later in ways that you can't control, um, or are not as aware of. And that actually relates to the other point that I wanted to say about what you were saying is that like when you were talking about like hierarchy in schools and stuff like that, it's kind of like we were saying like it's not we're not exactly saying that uh social relationships end up being completely abandoned. It's that the kinds of social relationships that people have, the depth of those relationships, the quality of them, are not as good as they could be, and not what they could be. So it's not that social relationships are themselves completely abandoned, because what we're saying is like social being is so fundamental to who people are that we find ways to do that no matter what we're around. Like if you remember, I just thought of the movie Castaway. Tom Hanks makes a person out of a ball because he has no one
Hmm.
else there. It's that kind of thing, you know. Like so, like we relate. We relate. That's because socializing is so deeply uh, ingrained in who we are, and so we're actually just talking about the quality of that thing and being able to be conscious and explicit and mindful of what our relationships are like, and what they could be like as well. And I guess we're saying there's we've forgotten a lot of the potential for human relationships that exists. What would you say within and between us? We can relate in fundamentally better ways than people tend to relate these days. That's the
Yeah,
premise.
and it's yeah, I tracked all that, and definitely glad got us, or I like the direction that it's taking us in.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, I just think of uh this book I was reading where it talked about how a person's like their degree of meaningful relationships in their life heavily corresponds to like how happy they are and their overall life satisfaction. Um, and I mean, there's the studies of like loneliness is really harmful for your health because it's a stress signal. It's chronic stress, and chronic stress, creates all sorts of like disease in the body and that type of stuff. But people who live the longest, they have like some of the most like rich social lives and feelings of like community and family. And it's not just like it's not just like a bunch of strong relationships. It's like the levels of like very strong like intimate family unit and then like
Mm,
goes outward a web up to the point where it's like loose associations with like the person working at the corner store.
hmm.
um so it's just like definitely an ecology of relationships, and that's a really just fundamental thing to, I mean, who we are as like an emergent property of nature. Like everything learned how to be a part of a whole.
Mm.
And yeah, it's just like what motivated us to create this externality of becoming the isolated consumer? Like what did that start in the spirit of, Like was it like French Enlightenment, like Renaissance?
I think it's deeper than that. I think it has to do with a kind of when I say deeper, I mean older. Um,
Okay.
um, it has to like this. Mm, from mine, Peterson made a pretty good case that individualism is very central to the kind of guiding philosophy of the West. And so it's a kind there are many thousands of years of uh, theological and philosophical and experiential commitment to investing in the value of individuals.
Hmm.
And th that's like it's just very simplistic to either say individualism is good or individualism is bad, and on the other
Yeah.
hand to say uh, the opposite. So what would that be? Like community is either uh, it's the classic division is like individualism and collectivism in like Eastern and Western cultures. Like, oh, China's a more collectivistic culture. Oh, America's a more individualistic culture. It's like, sure, in some ways, but also that's a pretty simplistic way of, judging entire cultures. So anyway, I'm not saying that either individualism or collectivism is either good or bad. They're both potentially awesome and potentially pathological. And here we're focused on some of the ways in which individualism as a guiding philosophy for a culture can become pathologized. And that isn't to say that individualism isn't a central uh, guiding value and one that I think, will be committed to upholding regardless of whether we feel we're committed to it, to be honest. I think it's so deeply within us that it's not something that you can just kind of easily give up. But we are saying, well, I don't know. There are ways in which individualism has become corrupted, and it can lead to a kind of isolation and separation of people, where so much emphasis is placed on uh, the autonomy of individuals that those individuals can forget how interrelated they are, how dependent on other things, other people, uh, a whole society, a whole web of complex interactions, the ecology of the world.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, does that track?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
And I think it's an example of like how maybe language gets us into a trap, and language informs our patterns of thinking, and how language is limited kind of maybe limits the way we think and like get assign meaning to our outer worlds when
Mm,
like the either or type of thing, where it's like, oh, either individual or collective. I think that's why the best we can come up with in language is like the concept of synthesis,
mm,
and I guess like words like nuance. But I think there's definitely like a middle road for sure in that, like the relationship between the individual and the collective. Um, shit, sorry, I just keep like losing my trains of thought.
it's all right.
Um, yeah, definitely the competition thing. I think that there's just become so much like uh negative type of competition, and it's definitely associated with like a more like selfish survival rivalrous type of
Mm,
dynamic
mhm,
that like I want to condemn it, but also like that doesn't mean that all competition is bad. And I do
mm,
think it serves like a very good function. And I don't know, we could call that like healthy competition. But I think in the name of like, as long as we have like a good cultural objective, like a healthy North Star, like I don't think competing to that is bad, because like we challenge each other and we put like it's like a hormesis. It's like a mutual hormesis. Like two people are competing with each other, but hopefully in a way that's like synergetic,
mhm,
not where they're like trying to out compete the other one and put the other one out of business.
mm, mm. Yeah, we could see that in our conversation today, where each of us has contributed different things to our conversation. And mm, how am I linking that to competitiveness? It's kind of like, mm, maybe that's not as easy to do, but there's something about the differences between people that is important to the synergy of them showing up together. So it's like there's some competition between the ideas that each of us has, like the individual contribution that each of us can make to the conversation. Like as we bounce those unique contributions off each other, then the synergy of a conversation that we're able to create together can emerge. Whereas like
Hmm.
if we were not, if we weren't able to appreciate, respect, acknowledge the differences between our worldviews, I don't know, opinions, just us being different, then we wouldn't get that uh, alchemy as much, relational alchemy. And so, but we should explain the hormesis principle a little bit more because that's a really useful concept. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, and then you just fill anything in that you feel like wasn't explained or that you have a different angle on. Yeah, hormesis is like the concept of like stressing a healthy stressor to like an adaptive system that causes it to grow and develop into something stronger or head in a direction of like more a higher adaptive capacity. So like just the easiest example is like breaking down a muscle from working out, like sends the signal to the muscle that it needs to grow stronger to be able to lift that same thing easier, to like adapt in a way that is I guess just I don't know, that serves some sort of function. Like if you have to lift stuff, it could be like a threat to your survival if you can't grow stronger to be able to do it easier.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's
Yeah, and I think probably examples are the best way to illustrate the principle. And like
yeah.
the human body is, what would we say, replete with great examples of hormesis. Like, talk about the development of the immune system. Um, if you keep your
Yeah.
kids from playing in the dirt ever, then they're much more likely to get sick later on because the immune system develops best when it's stressed by incoming pathogens. Um, yeah, so I mean that probably relates to like the importance of newborns eating lots of different kinds of food in the early periods of their development because then they're kind of exposed to things early on that then like set them up on kind of longer term developmental trajectories. Um, but the other example that I had is the way in which hot and cold therapy works. So like if you
Oh yeah, yeah.
expose yourself to the extremes of relative, like tolerable extremes of temperature, just like hot and cold showering, then your body has to like work harder to maintain homeostasis, the ability to maintain core body temperature, for example, despite the extremes of temperature in the external environment, and that's a kind of that places a kind of stress on your metabolism where uh, I think I'm not exactly sure. I think it might end up being like a higher metabolic load or something like that, where your body basically gets better at being able to maintain homeostasis because you've stressed it, because you've tested its ability to do that thing. It gets better at it. Which is, I mean, exercise is the great example that you're just using. Like doing something hard means that you get better at doing the hard thing. Whereas if you don't do the hard
Yeah.
thing, you get worse at doing it. It's essentially that.
Yeah, it
Um,
becomes easier.
yeah. But we're also talking about that in relationship, right? So what do we mean exactly by hormesis in relationship? It's something like there's a version of competition where like as you kind of bounce your ideas off each other and like have a war in the language of ideas, an abstract war rather than a physical kinetic war, then you grow and learn, and each person ideally gets to a place that they wouldn't have been able to get to on their own as a result of the conversation. And
Mhm.
that's an example of hormesis in relationship where I mean a good example of that is that it's essential to the process of science where like these scientists in this extremely narrow field that like argue with each other about something that honestly doesn't fucking matter a lot of the time. Ideally they're following that thread of like the disagreements between them are productive. It's a useful disagreement because they both get to a place where they couldn't have got to if there was just one person there. But we should also just very briefly outline the ways in which that can go awry or astray. And it's kind of like if that kind of competitive spirit happens too much, then there's not a sense that you're working with them anymore. And so it's like what we're actually talking about is that there's a cooperative spirit there that the competitive spirit is contained within. And so a great example of that is sports games. So like uh you have to agree to the rules of the game before you agree to play against another team. And like if the other, or another good example is like in geopolitics, like two armies that are like going to war might agree to some rules of war and be like, oh, we're not going to violate these, international human rights or whatever, because you know that's kind of fucked up even if we're at war. And then
Mhm.
if you want to do something, if you want to be like a really bad actor in a game, you will break the rules of the game to win the game, or in war you will violate the essential human rights to win the war or something like that. uh, and in science that might look like destroying someone's reputation for the sake of the advancement of your own career, or I don't know exactly. I'm trying to think of examples, but it's kind of like where that competitive spirit kind of overrides uh uh the cooperation that has to kind of go along with it. Um,
Yeah.
the cognitive scientist John Vervaeke has a good way of talking about that in ancient Greek terms, where there's a difference between uh, the kind of way of relating that he calls philia Nikeia, and now I'm going to forget the other one, philia uh, Sophia. Yeah, that's the origin of the word philosophy. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like the love of wisdom versus the love of victory. So if you're having a
Mm,
conversation with someone where you're trying to win, fundamentally, that's your orientation, that's your goal, then I guess what we're saying is that's an unsustainable emphasis on the competitive spirit. Whereas the philosophy of wisdom, the love of wisdom, is about using the competitive spirit as a generative tool for something that's useful for both parties. Does that make
yeah.
sense? Does that
Yeah,
track?
that's
That's a useful
basically,
framing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a great way to basically explain like finite game versus infinite game in a nutshell.
Yeah. Say more about
Was
that.
those two. Um, so I guess just like when you said victory, um, it means like I see like the infinite game as a bigger victory, and both people get to win because like wisdom is net better than winning against someone else. And beating them in the debate just for the sake of like beating someone else for like the selfish ego reasons for whatever reason. But you know, if we're playing the infinite game, then it's kind of like motivated by the greatest good of all. And then kind of we could use like metacognition and start using and leveraging competition to our advantage by
Mm,
understanding like ways to use it in a healthy way.
mm,
And I mean like people like sports is a great example because like the greats will always talk about like their level of greatness that they achieved, they'll attribute to like other people who
mm,
were other greats that were maybe like threatening their position, you know. They wanted to be better than that person. So they
mm,
pushed each other. And that person wouldn't have been as great as they were without the other person to motivate them. And I guess like they wanted to be better than each other. So maybe I mean it's kind of a finite game within an infinite game,
mm,
like sports for sure. But I guess it makes sense that like I mean I guess just competition could be co-opted really easily for the finite game because if you're an organism and the name of the game is like survival and replication
mm,
and you don't care about competition and there's another one that does and it'll easily outcompete you, then you don't get like what your gene wants. So I mean, I guess competition's easily like coded into our genes.
mm,
But then you study something like ecology and it's like, okay, everything's interdependent. So like there are things we compete against. But also if you don't know how to cooperate, then you also die.
mm, mm,
So they're both, I think, necessary. And I guess like I've adopted this thought that cooperation is fundamental and primary and competition is secondary. But I don't know. I would be interested to think more deeply about that now. But either way, we do have the blessing of metacognition to where we can understand that cooperating is in the best interest of everybody.
mm.
And yeah, I
With
don't know.
yeah, yeah.
You go ahead.
Oh well, I mean, it's complicated, isn't it? Because we're kind of saying, um, it seems as if there's some kind of imbalance, roughly speaking, broadly speaking, where there doesn't seem to be enough for me of the right kinds of cooperation, and also not enough of the right kinds of competition, where like the lack of cooperation is manifesting as just that, as a lack of like, I don't feel as if I'm in deep relationship with enough people that I can fundamentally trust and fundamentally have enough of a shared relational basis from which to operate from with to be able to, well, it's not generative in the way that I want it to be. It's not there in the way that I want it to be, as I would say I feel when we talk. Um, and then on the other hand, with competition, it's like it feels as if on the one hand, there's like not enough of the right kinds of competition and too much of the wrong kinds of competition. So there's also a lack there, but there's also an excess, where there's a lot of, arguing for the sake of victory going on, and not much of, using rivalry for the sake of the infinite game, let's say.
Yeah,
Mm,
I think that's
um,
a
yeah.
no. I want you to finish.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess I was just gonna. Mm, it's kind of like that ended up getting complicated, didn't it? Because we were talking about kind of like there's something about cooperation and relationship and community that we want to emphasize the importance of and be able to bring people towards. But we're also discovering that as a kind of North Star does not exclude the good kind of cooperation, a competition that we want either.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not that we're saying, I'm not saying that I want to fundamentally emphasize cooperation over competition. And gosh, there's so much competition, we need to just cooperate. That's partly what I'm saying, but I'm also saying that something like optimal competition is contributes towards that North Star. It doesn't take away from it. So it's a retooling of competition rather than a um, preventing of it or a withholding of it. Is that track?
yeah. And I think there's a kind of I guess it's another dialectic of like cooperation and competition, but that
Mm-hmm.
there's like it's nuanced and there is a synthesis of both of them. Um, and I had another thought about oh, I guess like what I was gonna say is like think about science. Like what does science try to do? Like what's like the maybe it's even an unspoken North Star. Like you try to like discover um insights and have evidence for uh truth and discovering deeper insights into the nature of truth. And I guess you can leverage that in many different ways, which we've seen like people leverage from the wrong state of consciousness, which has led to the advancing like military technology instead of how to like enrich ecosystems. But anyways, when people argue like scientists, like they get co-opted by wanting a victory
Mm.
and they're not sticking to the original spirit
Mm.
of what science is, you know?
That makes it idolatrous or unfaithful, actually.
Yeah.
Uh, mm, mm,
So I also wanted to introduce the something that popped up earlier, which between the individual and the collectivism dialectic. And I was thinking like you can't grow into your individuated, like highest version of yourself without being a part of a community. Just like how a potted plant can't grow nearly as into itself as it would if it was rooted and connected to the forest. Like having that resource of connection to and relationship to other allows you as an individual, an emergent property of that ecosystem to fully be you.
mm.
So you like need a collective to fully flower into who you are.
Yes. So even if you have totally selfish motives, even if you're only interested in your own personal development, optimizing your own who you are and what you want to become, etc., etc., even if you're fundamentally not empathetic, not interested in the well-being of others, that should still lead you, I would say, to recognize that people are the best version of themselves when they can be in deep relationship with others. And that
Mhm.
doesn't preclude the value of solitude or of
Yeah, I was also thinking
introversion
that.
or of total social isolation from time to time. Um, but the capacity to be in deep relationship can also inform those periods. Hmm.
Yeah, no, great point. And it's good to it's great to mention that because there are like implications or assumptions that someone could make based on what we're saying, but
Mm,
it's like everything's so much more nuanced.
mm,
And it's good to include that, like, yeah, there are benefits to solitude at the same time for sure. And
mm,
that is like a resource in itself to be able to, you know, uh generate creativity or something that could uh add and contribute to your development, your personal
mm,
development and
mm.
kind of individuation type of thing. But maybe unless you have something else to say on that, maybe let's try to come back to the
Hmm.
central question
Yeah,
and
yeah.
see if
Well,
we could.
I have a quick example from COVID actually, where uh, Melbourne had the longest lockdown in the world. So we were locked down during COVID for the most part of 18 months, really. And that definitely shaped me and shaped a lot of the people that I know. And so what it actually meant was that it was kind of constraining of my social world, my social universe, where um, obviously there was much less time for the kinds of social activities that I would normally do. Like you literally couldn't go out into the world and be with people. But at the same time, I was living in a share house of, I don't know, 5 people or so. And in a way, I spent more time around those people than I would have otherwise. And so there are definitely advantages to that. And I got so much out of relationships with those people. But what I want to say here is that uh, COVID created this inability for me to pursue the kinds of deep relationships with people in my life that I would normally pursue if I hadn't been locked down. And one of the effects of that is that it actually prevented me from spending quality time on my own as well. And so that isn't necessarily what you would expect, right? You would probably expect, given this lockdown, people are going to spend a whole lot more time in social isolation, um, and that might be really hurtful for some people. But that's actually not what I found. I found that I became much more unable to genuinely get time on my own because I was always around the people that I was sharing a house with. So there was this middle zone where I couldn't get the kind of the extroverted social activities that I normally wanted, and I also couldn't get the introverted isolated activities that I would normally want. So that leads to this kind of that dialectic in that time ended up being in a place of dysfunction where I couldn't have the best of either of those two worlds rather
Mm,
than because I'm saying something like when people can get the kinds of relational depth that we are, let's say, arguing for, it also means that they can get the kinds of depth from being on their own as well. Like there's a dialectic there where like they can either both not work together or both work together, if that makes sense.
yeah, what I'm hearing is like instead of the higher order synthesis that we want, it's like a lower form of whatever the opposite of synthesis is. Um,
Yeah,
there's like a lower
disintegration or something.
disorder. Yeah, it's like a lower form of complexity that's more disorderly
Yes.
from the dialectic. So it's kind of like a double triangle, and you go to the lower form,
Yeah.
the worst
Yeah.
of both worlds.
Yeah. Politics is another
Yeah,
good example of that. You can, you know, people at the extremes of either political spectrum, either on the extreme left or extreme right, are higher in dark triad personality traits. And so, in a sense, they actually have more in common with each other. They kind of connect
yeah.
up at this lower point. Whereas there's this uh what would you say something about the you used a political term earlier. It was like the neutral middle, but also like
The alt
um
middle.
yeah, the alt middle maybe, where it's like instead of being just boring in the middle and the middle collapses, uh, it's at a higher stage of I don't know awesomeness or something.
Yeah, I mean that's the name of the game. Age of Synthesis.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we should jump back to our framing question. So we've massively tangented, um, usefully, I think. But I wanted
Yeah,
to
yeah.
get back to what exactly it was about community in ancient times that we think people were getting value from. What was it that was adaptive about those things, maybe? Although I'm conscious of not wanting to just use an evolutionary lens, but it's definitely a powerful tool. Would that be a place that you think is good to jump back in, or is there somewhere in particular that you wanted to go?
Yeah, I think that's good. And that can kind of like tie back into the when we were talking about cooperation.
Mm,
So I mean, like cooperation was very from a through the lens of like the gene agenda, like it allowed people to survive and really like with our intelligence. Sure, we had coherence and collective intelligence, so we could start making tools and coordinate to do things that ensured like a greater odds of survival.
hmm
Um, but I mean, like I don't know, we could introduce like there's something about being with other people in magical situations that feels greater than just like the reductionist survival explanation, you know? It's like we were talking
hmm
about like the search for novelty. Like there's something about in my mind like the concept of like oneness and then separating and like from the Brahman there's like all these individual distinct parts that are different expressions of the one. And
mm,
it feels like there's something about those being able to connect that eventually like is heading towards the omega point, you know, where like
yeah,
we're becoming the body of Christ type of thing.
yeah, yeah. The second
And there's
coming.
some there
Yeah.
yeah, there's something spiritual about being able to have like strong intimate connections
hmm
with other parts of the universe, you know.
hmm hmm
We all have
Yeah,
that thing in common that we all came from the one, you know.
we do. Um, yeah, lots of places to jump off there. I feel like um, we can tie in the anthropology by talking about what we understand of ancient people's experience of living in relationship, both to each other, to themselves, and to the world, and how that experience, as you're saying, a subjective experience of what it's like to, um, I don't know, I guess have experiences of a certain kind, or but also just to live within that social framework, that is contributive to like survival and adaptivity, but it's not limited to those things either. Um,
Yeah.
mm, okay. Well, this is a fruitful place to begin. It's like what would we say? If you actually go to um indigenous communities, I'm thinking particularly in North America, from what I've heard, but also all throughout the world. Um, I'm obviously generalizing here, and there's obviously a lot more to unpack by actually hearing those people speak. But there's a general sense that I get of, okay, like what does it mean to be in deep relationship with the living world like they were? Um, and part of the answer to that is that um, they don't live in such a way that they feel that there's this distinction between themselves and the world around them.
Mm,
So that's a really fundamental point. So, we
yes.
could have an argument about philosophy and make the case that this distinction between here I am, this is myself here sitting behind the screen, and everything, all this stuff around me is that's not me, right? And that's a product of, I don't know, Western Cartesian rationalism, yada yada yada. And we could talk philosophy about it, but we're also saying that um, those concepts are relevant to someone's experience of the world, someone's subjective feeling of the world in which they are embedded. And even you can see in my language there, right? If someone is embedded in a world, that already sets up a certain kind of what we would call ontology, someone's world view. And I'm talking literally there about like how do they experience themselves? What do they experience? That's the thing. And it's like the language here gets tricky, but like roughly speaking, there is a sense that uh, in ancient times and in ancient cultures, they didn't have this as much of a strong distinction between themselves and the world in which they are embedded. So they were able to have this felt uh, experience of relating to the world around them that was, I'm going to say, uh, um, well, we could say something like it changed their behavior in such a way that, like,
Yeah.
if you fundamentally are opposed to the world out there, then you kind of act in opposition to it. So this psychological feeling, again, it's just literally a subjective feeling about how you relate to the world and whether you're distinct from it or not, kind of thing, and how distinct from it you are, and etc. etc. That changes the way you relate to it, and can relate to sustainable living. Um, does that is that a good starting place for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to try to keep it tied to the center, I guess, without going too far. But we can definitely do that because I guess like that, what you're talking about is only really possible, it feels only possible if we have the foundation of like the necessity to need each other.
Mm,
And yeah, because I mean, it feels that we have come with the habit of uh and patterns of thinking in terms of parts and isolating things and being mechanistic.
hmm.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that we've ended up as a species becoming isolated and separate and
Yes.
into
Yes.
parts. So there we see something about how our worldview has something to do with our emotions, our thoughts and emotions, which inform our actions. And then our actions kind of like move atoms around in physical
Mm,
space, I guess you could say. That's
yeah.
kind of like Daniel and Nate talk about, um, which then has ramifications, you know? And in turn, the actions we take um, create different environments, which kind of like guide certain subjective experiences, which is in now case the subjective experience of like loneliness or depression or
Hmm.
you know creating the conditions for a school shooter to emerge.
Yes.
um that's kind of what's we could track that back to like a certain type of thinking and
Hmm.
how we relate to the world.
Hmm.
So we could see that as like, is there a relationship between how we relate to the world and the necessity of needing each other, right?
Mm, mm, mm. Absolutely. I mean, the short version is absolutely, in my
Right.
opinion.
Podcast ends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. We saved the
Um,
world.
um, yeah, I mean, so many good thoughts there. I think like a lot of this is ringing bells for me about Ken Wilber's pre-trans fallacy. So people should read that essay if they haven't already. It's probably the one piece of Ken Wilber's work that has stuck with me the most. Um, but maybe I should say more about what that is. It's kind of like this. We're kind of like, we're talking about ancient times, right? And we're like, okay, there's something about the psychology, there's something about the behavior, something about the experience of those peoples, broadly speaking, that we feel as if we're lacking now. And that's a kind of fall from grace argument. That's a kind of, hey, we've experienced this fall. We used to be in this state of, divine grace of some kind, yada, yada. We don't have it anymore. We lost our mojo as a species. What did we lose? Where did it go? And now we're making this case that it's like, well, something about separation. So there's this like pre-existing state of wholeness, um, and or like unity of some kind, and that was a felt experience, I guess. And now we're saying we kind of lost that, and it's like this separation thing, and there are these feedback loops between our environment and our psychology that kind of have
Hmm.
driven us towards this isolationist uh, way of being, way of behaving, way of feeling, way of relating, and then we're aiming for this kind of post that stage. So this is I'm presenting a kind of three-stage model here where there's like a pre-separation stage, and then there's like a separation stage, and then there's like a post-separation unity stage. And so that's how this would map to Wilber's pre-trans fallacy, where we're not wanting to say, hey, there's just something that we need to get back to that we've forgotten. We just need to reclaim something that we used to have. But I'm also saying, we have to do something fundamentally new. Like there's a contribution of this stage of separation that's useful and that shouldn't be abandoned. And so one way of framing that, like, don't let me go too far off track, but it's just important. So it's like one way is a dialectic between unity and separation. And so we've been talking about like cooperation and relationship, and in this dialectic, those things might be reduced to, hey, we want people to have this experience of unity, and that will be good for them. And um, that might be true, but also the experience of separation is also important. So there's something about this thing that we're trying to move towards, which can contain the benefit in this case of both unity and separation. And arguably, we could see that in the way of being of ancient peoples, or maybe not, but where um, they had an experience of feeling unified, both with the world around them and with each other, but also they were individuals. or arguably not. We could say that it really took until our modern civilization for individuals, as we understand them, to come online. And if that is the case that we're wanting to say, or I'm wanting to say, that the thing we're trying to get people to move towards, and the thing that we're trying to move towards, is a state of being where we can feel, we can embody this deep way of relating with other people, but also deeply retain a sense of our own autonomy and individuality, which has to do with feeling separate from other people. So there's a way in which feeling separate from other people and feeling in deep relationship with other people, that they can be that can be a synergy in and of itself. Does that?
Just say that last part one more time.
Yeah. So there's a way in which feeling in deep relationship with people, feeling unified with people, and also feeling a separateness from other people, feeling a sense of one's own autonomy and agency, and feeling a sense of sovereignty within oneself, and uh,
Uniqueness,
yeah,
distinction.
and individual discernment as well, like choosing
Mm,
who you're in relationship with and being conscious of how you're
yeah.
doing that. It's like those there's a dialectic there between, we could frame that as individualism, collectivism, or you can frame it in this case as like separation and unity. The thing that we're
Yeah.
aiming for isn't just unity. It's not something that we've just lost that we're trying to get back to. It's something fundamentally new, which includes the value of separation and individuality. Does that get it
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Because like I've said before, we can't just go back to the way things were because indigenous cultures didn't have the type of like framework of like complex societies, and they didn't have, most importantly, the godlike technology. And all the, I mean, they were competing as tribes, but they didn't have the power to through multipolar traps. I don't imagine there were things like tragedy of the commons and like actual detriments to um, the living, breathing planet that is like the body that we're a cell of,
Mm,
to use that metaphor.
yeah.
So now we're actually at the capacity of like cancerous cells in
Mm,
on the planet of Earth. At least like maybe to ourselves. Maybe like it's not a perfect analogy, even though we are depopulating like the natural world. Like maybe it'll get to a point where we cause self-termination, self-extinction, but then the Earth will be continue to be anti-fragile and carry on. But anyways, that's kind of tangent. Um, one thing that's cool is like Charles Eisenstein, who's like kind of a social philosopher. He has talked about how if you asked an indigenous person who is a product of that indigenous culture, like to picture themselves in their head, they would picture themselves, but also like with their community, with other people, with like
mm,
the trees and the
mm,
nature that they were
mhm.
involved with. So like definitely a sense of identity is really important. Like how do you
Yeah,
relate to
yeah.
your own identity? That's for sure a major fundamental component that will inform how you maneuver and behave in the world. And definitely things that culminate to the expression of your behavior are really important because behavior is the thing that makes a difference and causes the butterfly effect type of thing.
Hmm.
But in the Stephen Taylor in the book Waking from Sleep, who John Vervaeke shouted at him out. That's how I know about that book. He talks about how we can really take benefits from, he calls it the overdeveloped ego. And
Mm.
he says like we shouldn't go back to a very loose sense of personal identity
Yes, yes.
because there are like if the name of the game is growth and novelty and like cultural evolution or just evolution period, like there could be something that's a higher complexity of culture, and we want to keep progressing, like there's great tools for how to do that that's emerged from the overdeveloped ego. We
Mm.
just need like the wisdom and love to uh you know be the steward of that intelligence that's
Yes.
emerged from like the overdeveloped ego. So yeah, it's definitely a synthesis process at the like post trans, I guess you would call it, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. And that's you're essentially mirroring with that point, the point about the pre-trans fallacy. The fallacy comes from people uh believing that the post phase and the pre-phase are the same when they're fundamentally different. And so in this case, we can tie it to ego and say something like, it's something like we can't forget the history that we've been through. We can't forget the cultural experiences that we've had. or as individuals. And so it's not a like a hearkening back to, or like it's not just for not just a going back in time to something that we've lost. It's a creation of something new as well. Like one metaphor that I just had, or maybe it's an analogy, who knows? You can consider history kind of like a one-way valve. Like you know how in the heart there are all these valves in the blood vessels that are like constrained in one way, so the blood can't flow backwards. And
Yeah.
similarly in engineering and like pipes and stuff, they'll have like a one way valve where like so stuff that can only get through, it can't go back again. Well, history is kind of like that process as well. It's like once it's happened, well, we can't go back to just living uh as the ancient peoples did because we've gone through history. We've gone through all these experiences that we've had. We have to take the good things about history that we've found and learned, and uh, the word that I'm going to use is exact them, which is like
Mm.
to like in the same way that our mouths were originally for eating and then we turn them into language use. So it's like to repurpose something. Um, yeah. Does that?
Exaptation.
Yeah. It's a very useful concept from evolution.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
But I wanted to double click on the identity stuff if we could. I feel like that's super, super important and shouldn't be, um, or needs to be underlined. Like, what you were talking about there was like not only someone's experience of uh, being in relationship with others and relationship with the world, but how they identify, like who they are. So it's not that they would necessarily say, uh, I less often or something like that. But if you ask them about the bounds of their identity, they include other people as fundamentally important to who they are, and they include the world around them as fundamentally important to who they are. And what am I saying? I guess I'm saying that also seems part of the solution to me, um, where uh, ultimately I think we are going to end up using technologies of conversation. We could say psychotechnologies, but for the moment, something like emergent properties of new types of conversation uh, to modify our sense of who we are. I think that's endgame for me, as far as I understand it. Because at the moment we still have this feeling right here where we're talking, where you're over there on your little Zoom camera, and here I am over on my little Zoom camera, and there's in a sense we haven't managed yet to change our fundamental sense of who we are by talking to each other. And I think there are ways of uh, speaking that we as a culture, as a civilization, as a world are on the brink of learning that we can kind of intuit towards uh, something that's a product of our conversation that we can both be a part of that could be fundamentally generative of a new kind of identity for each of us. And so let me try and explain what I mean there because I feel like I was like super vague and didn't exactly hit the nail on the head. It's something like uh
Or
there's some
vaguely.
quality there's some quality about our conversations which I'm invested in, and something that I feel I can't get anywhere else. That's a key piece of it, right? I'm getting something here
Mm-mm.
that I'm not getting other places. I want to turn that feeling into my identity. I can't get access to my best self, or
Mm.
I can't get access to, I don't know, I guess my identity unless I come here into this kind of relationship. And that could be a way of binding bad actors, right? Where like if there's something essential, absolutely essential about relating with others, then uh becoming a school shooter would be impossible because you couldn't be out of relationship for that long, kind of thing. Does that do anything for you?
Well, you mentioned something about bad actors. Did that imply at all that like people could like synergetically like be school shooters together?
Huh, yeah, I didn't think of that. That is something that we would need to solve as well because like you would solve the individual bad actor problem, but if you had a group that was a group of bad actors, then they could all be we could build the Borg. We could uh
Yeah. But I mean, fundamentally, like they would all be bonded by uh this feeling of not fitting in or something. Like, I mean, I'm guessing that's like the Columbine shooters because like there was more than one, right?
yeah.
So I guess like fundamentally, if we're if we're not sinning, as in like not missing the mark, the aim is to have people feel like they belong. And instead of like a group of people that the nature of their belonging is that they don't belong. But I guess
To not have
I
that,
don't know.
sorry.
I guess it depends like how you respond to that because I've the people who I've found who I can relate to a lot, uh one thing we have in common is that we're all kind of been misfits, but I guess it's like beneficial to not fit into the insane society.
Yeah.
And I'll say the Krishnamurti quote really quick, where it's like it's no good measure of health to be well adjusted to an insane society. So finding others that don't fit into the insane society, that's good. But yeah, I guess like yeah, what I'm saying is the aim is to have people feel like their cup is filled, in a sense of like interdependency and socially like they belong,
Mm,
so that they would be feel a connection to themselves and others.
mm,
And I mean, this is like definitely new territory, but like going making the transition from ethnocentrism to global centrism,
hmm
which I think like uh awakening experiences are a vehicle to cross that bridge for sure. Um, then I mean that type of belonging, feeling at home in the universe, would mean that you would be playing the infinite game. Um, so I'm just saying, like, if that's our aim, and I think
mm,
that would like another word that I mean that would just like prevent any school shooters from emerging from that
mm.
type of culture. Um, but let me see. I kind of want to bring it back a little bit. Let me see. Um, yeah, I guess it's just like a prerequisite to a lot of the I mean, it's all meta, but I guess there's like prerequisites maybe to the meta. Like we need to need each other, or
We
else
need to
like,
want to need each other as well.
yeah, yeah, that too, because it's not necessary. And I mean, thank you for saying that. It reminded me of Nate's advice, Nate Hagen's The Great Simplification. He said he said to collapse early because the majority of people won't change until they're forced to, until they have no other choice. But part of us collapsing early is learning how to need each other again. And like
Mm,
from that needing each other, I think will all the meta modeling and meta engineering for a new culture will take place. I
mm,
mean, it's already kind of happening, but
hmm.
I mean, that's just part of it. Like, how do we design a way where we need to need each other? And I don't know what that. I mean, I think that looks like simplifying early and collapsing early. But I mean, that's obviously tough when you still have access to technology and all the things that make you a potted plant, because
Yeah.
it's easy to want to be more comfortable. And when you have that option, like it's super fucking coded into us to just like
Hmm.
want to be more comfortable, type of thing. So yeah, I mean, no pressure to find what you want to find in that.
Mm. There's a lot there. I'm feeling depleted actually. Like I we covered a lot of territory. I'm not sure how much more territory I'm going to be able to cover today. Um, hmm. There's something about the binding bad actors thing, which feels important. Like we're not just talking about like um creating something which can be optional for people to want if they want. But we're actually talking about like designing a new culture in such a way that uh the kind of relating that we're talking about, people wouldn't be able to go without it. Um, which might actually seem kind of pathological because they're kind of saying like, oh, people have to do this thing, and ideally the thing would be useful enough, good enough that that would be okay. And like, so I don't know, take like all the good things about how we relate to each other, a sense of belonging, right? Imagine if like someone became so invested in their sense of belonging that they had to show up with other people in order to have that sense. That's kind of pathological, but that's also arguably a good thing. Like if if someone really feels as if they can't get that sense of belonging from elsewhere, then like if we develop a situation where people are forced to get the sense of belonging from relating deeply with other people, that actually seems like a sustainable way of creating culture. That seems like a sustainable thing, I think. I don't know. I like there are indigenous versions of that. Like it would be a good example of this is from Tyson Yunkaporta Sand Talk, How Indigenous Thinking Can Save the World. There was a really, really interesting listen um, where in some Indigenous Australian cultures, among others, I would say, um, there was a um, there was a lot of like social pressure to not kind of go off on your own, and that was kind of looked down upon, or there was a kind of a cultural kind of binding of keeping people in the culture. Um, and so there's something valuable about that, which is like, I don't know, it's kind of complicated because I'm wanting to like track that at the same time as wanting to preserve the value of individual autonomy and discernment and isolation as well and introversion as well. So I'm wanting to kind of protect all of those things, but also at the same time be able to not let people become pathological by going off on their own and ruining everything.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's tough because one thing Jamie said is that like we need free will. Like
Yeah.
people need to maintain free will. But I guess ultimately like you'd want to incentivize that the thing that's needed as
Mm,
much as like having an Instagram account has been incentivized or like being online. Because like nobody has a gun to your head telling you to like use an iPhone, but like everybody fucking uses an iPhone, right? Because that's just the culture. Um, so it kind of seems to me like we have to, with the option of comfort and convenience, we have to be able to like choose the salad in the refrigerator that's like filled with donuts. And it definitely, I don't know if it has to be like that, but as long as we have this option, like it's definitely like that. Yeah, so definitely sensing it's starting to wind down.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I like this topic and I think there's like a lot to jam on for sure.
there is.
And I really like the question. But I want to maybe like try something out and maybe like if there's some sort of like platform that develops, like it'd be cool to do this as groups, but like just like how people like watch shows together and stuff, like maybe we could watch a podcast together
Mm,
and just like pause it as much as we want.
hmm
So I wonder if people would want to watch that too. Because like part of like listening to a podcast, you like feel like you're in that conversation, even though you can't contribute, but like you're getting insights and you're kind of feeding off of their synergy and you're like almost
mm,
a part of it in a way.
mm.
Um, so I wonder if people would like listening to other people have a conversation about a podcast, or if that would just be too much. I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to think about it. It's kind of like one of those like X person reacts to video.
Yeah, or it's kind of like Twitch, I guess. Well, I don't know.
Mm. But yeah, good idea. Like we can try that for sure. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Mm.
So as we start to wind down, like what is like your felt sense of like being in your body?
Mm. At the moment,
Yeah.
um, kind of need to pee. Uh, um, hmm. I feel tired. I feel like I used a lot of social energy, or I don't know. I feel like I've been holding on to some of those points that I made about I don't know, just like the different dialectic stuff and like the importance of like carving out space for making a nuanced point. It's really hard to do really hard to say, oh, we're not saying this, and we're also not saying that, and we're also not saying that. It's like, God, man, it's
Yeah.
exhausting trying to actually make a point.
Yeah.
Uh,
It feels
yeah,
beneficial to like establish ground rules of like, hey, like we can make a case for the thesis and the antithesis. And it's just
yes,
implied that we're it's implied that there's a greater order synthesis, but we're going
mm,
to talk about the signal from both sides.
yes,
And maybe if that's a ground rule, then like we don't have to spend so much time
yes, yeah. That's a useful
on
thing to do
yeah, spend so much time like, condemning the noise. Although
because then that
there
becomes
may
noise.
yeah, exactly. But there may be points where there is signal in talking about why noise is noise.
Yeah,
Does
so
that
maybe
track?
one thing that I'm feeling, yeah, it does track. One thing that I'm feeling is that I spent so much energy today in making sure that we weren't just saying something that would be perceived as noise, that I ended up being unable to connect with you as much. And
Mm,
there are a few points that were meta, and it's not to say that the content that we talk about has to be meta content, but I don't think I personally was demonstrating the thing that I'm advocating for as well as I have at other times, even though
mm,
perhaps the content that we were talking about might lead people in a certain intellectual direction towards those sorts of things. Does that make sense? I think ultimately I'm going to be making the case that there's fundamentally no way to convince people of what we're talking about. It's something that has to be demonstrated, something that has to be
yeah, yeah.
shown. And for me, I think that ultimately means it's useful to talk about the sorts of stuff that we were talking about today, but I think ultimately it's not sufficient, and we have to be able to demonstrate at all costs, even if that means sacrificing content that we feel is important for the sake of the thing that we're trying to move towards.
Yeah, I
Does that
agree.
track? Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah, I guess we can end the recording and
Hmm.
just kind of like in encircling in the circling things, or it'd be like a 5 minute period at the end where you kind of just debrief, talk
Hmm.
about it.
Okay.
Maybe we can try that.
Well, let's do that. Well, thank you for anyone that was listening. I don't know what that's like listening to us jam for a while. Oh well.
Yeah. Yeah, aloha.
Goodbye.
We're probably just talking to ourselves, our future
You've been
selves.
watching The Age of Synthesis.
Age of Synthesis podcast. Fuck, I can't do it right now.